This me. Can you hear that?
Yeah, that's all right. Well, welcome everybody to the Contact Exec podcast. I am here with some special guests from all around the world. I think today it's crazy, but I love technology and the fact that we can all get together from multiple corners of the universe and just chat. Today, I've got the folks from Nialli. Alan is here. Nancy Knowlton is here, and I'm just gonna start this off real general. I'm gonna kick it off first to Alan real quick, just because I want to say, Alan, give me a little bit of background on how did you get here and what's going on with Nialli today.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think sometimes I get asked, well, were you in construction or, did you enter through that door? And I often say we entered the door through the collaboration side of construction, how people work together. And it's just an integral part of our DNA and something we've carried forward. A lot of people probably don't know it, but Nancy and her partner actually invented the interactive whiteboard. So you remember the smart board?
Yes.
And that really started that whole idea of working at a wall with a wall of pixels, with the piece of software that complemented that hardware proposition. And we had an installation in Stanford at SIFE, that's Center for Integrated Facilities Engineering, and it got noticed by construction companies who went, hold it here, job site trailer, big rooms. And so we had a couple installations, and one of the companies started really appreciating this notion of, and this is unique to us, a multi-user where multiple people can be working at the same time, and also multi-touch, which enables gestures and manipulating content on the software. And so we, with a subsequent company, it's now our parent company called Nareva that Dave and Nancy started. And we had some software and we went, let's try it in a job site trailer. So we created a proposition, and we went and watched people use it and went, this isn't quite what they need. That this isn't quite mirroring that sticky note environment that they operate in, and was very common. And we visit a lot of job sites with a collaboration eye. The ethnographic research was actually a great opportunity to actually stand side by side with people in the trades, making promises and saying, are you sure you can get this done? And we realized our pedigree, our collaboration aspect of how we think about things could really, really play out in this environment. We could help teams work better. We could help teams with their promises in a simple way. And so that's how then Nialli was born. We came out of that research, we'll call it discovery work, and have developed the Visual Planner, which again, it mimics the sticky notes and is I call it relatively low time to value. People get it right away. Just like you get a sticky note, you get the application. There's no training required for the trades, the boots on the ground that are actually doing the work. And we continue to talk about that aspect. So in short form, the working together part and helping teams is really, our North Star, and continues to guide how we develop the product. And Nancy, you might have some more thoughts on that journey, because obviously you've been in it through the start.
I was gonna bounce that over to you, Nancy. Nialli is a cool name, first of all, but I'm just trying to figure out, where does that come from the whole smartboard technology? And there got to be some background to it, right?
Yeah, we have to give a big nudge to PCL, don't we, Alan? Because
Yes.
they saw a very general collaboration product that we had created and told us that we would have a much better opportunity to accomplish something in the construction space if we made it much more dedicated to construction. And so we did sort of hive that off from what we were doing at Nareva, customized it very much to the construction world, and that's where you find us today, trying to, I would say, draft off the last planner system and lean construction and provide the tools that will make collaboration in construction just that much more productive.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of lean construction and the kind of last planner system, pull planning, doing those kind of things. Alan, I wanted to ask you about that. You obviously, PCL was big, tip the hat to them because they're utilizing these types of things, right? They're utilizing a pull plan, but there's a lot of folks out there still trying to force their way through critical path management, and they're not really using a pull plan. Kind of give me the idea of what said, hey, this is the way to go for you guys.
Yeah, that was a learning journey for us because we started to run into different construction companies that are a different level of maturity of adopting lean practices and dedicating their systems and processes to getting better. And I think we got better along with our customers as we continued to develop various aspects of the loss planner system that Nancy mentioned. So I'd say it's been a collaborative journey with our customers as well, looking at their adoption and actually coming up with some unique elements in our visual planner that they actually help them with their journey. Because, a lot of times it is selling things internally and, they tell two people and they tell two people. So if it grows organically like that, you've got something of value where they're recommending, hey, you should use this, on your next project. So you see adoption in companies rise. And I think we like to be part of that story.
Right. So you've got Nialli, which is one, and you've got Nareva, which is the parent company. Is Nareva, is it kind of branching off? Like, what other products do we have there or is it all dedicated to construction product?
It isn't, except that the group conferencing product that Nareva makes, so a big room audio product, is actually relevant in a construction big room. So a lot of our products in Nareva get sold into classrooms, sort of 25 to 200 students, but that's the same in a construction trailer. You need good quality audio so that you can connect with other locations. So the products, although they're not specific to construction, they have value in the construction world as well.
Yeah, they say that 28% of the losses that happen in construction basically come down to poor communication and bad data, right? So I could definitely see this. And I wanted to talk to you a bit more about that because as you guys are rolling out this, what did you find? What were your kind of results with, say, PCL? And what was that feedback loop like? Where you say, well, it needs to be this or it needs to be that. What are some key markers along the way? Alan, I'll kind of throw that to you. Kind of, what were some key markers along the way, good advice that they gave you about this?
I think the one thing we've heard over and over and over again is, hey, we're going to make feature requests, but keep it simple, which is, a little bit contrary. Sometimes you can load up the features and things all of a sudden get crowded, we'll call it. But I think there were major elements of the last planner system in the big descriptors of should, can, will, and did. And so the should part would be something like, okay, we have a master schedule. This is what we should be aiming at. And so you import master milestones, for example. And so we added that. The will part is, the look ahead planning of 5 to 8 weeks out, or phase pull planning where you're looking at scope, sequence, and duration. And so we added that. And then the can is, a week ahead, and then locking that, saying, everybody agree this is the plan, adding that capability. So it was a constant honing of the proposition, and we continually listen. We have a great feedback mechanism from the sales and business development and marketing folks, what they hear at shows. Myself and product management team, we go through these on a regular basis and prioritize. And So, the major markers, though, were around satisfying the last planner system and, the real needs of our customers.
Yeah. So, and I want to kind of address that a little bit because I think one of the biggest problems that we see today is that accountability level
Mm.
in construction, right? And it's accepting accountability level. And everybody always utilizes this whole thing. They've got, well, we had a 70%, complete bid set, and then I developed my scope of work off of that bid set. And then we developed a schedule off of, said bid set. And then the 30% comes in after we've signed the contract, right? How does this, have you seen how this affects your final, the outcome of what goes on in the last planner system?
I'll take that question because it actually talks to the did part of the last planner, and that is looking at data and looking at analytics to get better. So we have a system of maintaining that master milestone, and if your actual milestone shifts, there's an alert, for example. And so that constant attention to being on time and on budget is top of mind because you have a visual map of, as you say, whether it's the last 30% or the reality of how we're actually building now. It's not just the idea of building and by this date. This is the reality. And we're finding that the majority of our projects that use and try and practice the last planner system are coming in on time. Our very first project, the Cancer Center here in Calgary, $1.4 billion project, which involved, as various levels of government and various levels of approvals and COVID. To Nancy's point about communicating remotely and having the proper equipment, came in on time and on budget. And we have many stories like that from customers. So I think just the attention, I remember we had one executive come in from a local general contractor. He says, you know why I want this? Because I want that trailer. When people walk in the room, they know why they're there. This is about planning, getting the job done right. This is a place where we make agreements and we make commitments to each other and we ensure that we're going to get things done. It becomes a mindset of culture and behavior. And like I said, we have a history of collaboration. So these types of things are really, really important for us to see and go, I think we're doing something helpful for our customers.
So, and that kind of leads me to Nancy. I had a question. So originally you don't come from the construction world, right? So construction world is a little different animal. And I want to get your kind of when you started to go down this path, tell me kind of first thoughts, what came to mind and you just realized like these people are just really screwed up. What's going on with them?
I don't think we ever said that.
You're not gonna get that out of us
I got
today
you.
at all. There's actually a lot that is very similar anytime that you talk to a customer. They're sincerely looking for help, and they will bring knowledge of their industry and tell us as much as they possibly can with the hope that we will apply our expertise in the best possible way to help them. And so, I came with a 25-year background of selling products into education, literally all over the world. But we also sold our products into the world's largest militaries. The U.S. Armed Forces was our single largest customer over the time period that we ran Smart Technologies, all of NATO. And so that is not a singular mindset, but it is a customer mindset that you develop. And so you listen hard. And I guess one of the things that I've learned, live by, if anybody is willing to tell you anything, listen, because there's wisdom to be shared there. Kudos to PCL for being so, well, let's call it dictatorial or directive to say, you got to change your application. And there's, a great opportunity here. We haven't just sold to PCL, we've sold to a wide variety of companies. So we must be on to some things. It's actually very invigorating to learn about a new industry. Alan, you weren't an expert in construction when you started. but you had this skill, ethnographic skills to go in and listen and learn. So that really has been the pleasure of developing this product.
Think I find it interesting to tell you talked about PCL and how they kind of said, hey, and I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into this because this is something that goes on in the industry still today, where you've got some tech founders, some startups, some folks out there that are trying to develop products, and they say, no, 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 this is your solution. And construction tends to push back and go, no, it's not my solution. You just think that it's my solution. They didn't listen, kind of to your point. And I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that PCL, notion with you. Like, how did that, you were ready to just to listen, right? You were ready to listen. And then what surprised you about, what were some of your big kind of aha moments?
Well, Alan, I'll just say one of the big aha moments was that we took three of our most experienced developers in Nareva, and we assigned them to what amounted to a research project. And Alan was part of that group as well, although not writing code. He was directing the activities of that group, and it was such a learning experience when we brought PCL in to take a look at what we had created from their very, I would say, limited description. Like, they did not design the application at all. They just told us what the end result needed to be. But it was so instructive on how quickly you can get to a prototype that proves out the value in an application. And so rapid prototyping involving customers, getting their early feedback, and then going to full development is really critical in the process.
Yeah, and just to add something from my perspective is spending time with them. They were generous with their time and understanding what they were thinking. There's a danger in listening to a single customer, but when you go to events like forums and shows and you see people gathering around the people that you're listening to for advice, or you hear them as one of the keynote speakers, and you go, okay, this is thought leadership. This isn't PCL. These people are talking for the industry. And that, for me, to your point of key moments, I think it solidified the notion that these are the right people to listen to because they are kind of the bellwether. They represent the industry. And because there's a danger, you can zig and zag if you listen to your customers. And so some of the principles they talked about in the loss planner system became our North Star as we designed and developed the prototype. It was very invigorating. It was a lot of fun.
I'm interested in your opinion. Like, as we were talking about, I'm a big fan of Last Planner system. I didn't, my experience with it is fairly, limited. I worked on a lot of small projects. We didn't have a lot of, I built restaurants and a few hotels, no major capital projects or anything like that. So I had a lot of autonomy and a lot of control in these things. But in these larger projects that we're talking about, you have to delegate that control, that autonomy in order to kind of get there, you get across the finish line. And that's difficult for some people. Some people can't really wrap their head around it. And I just kind of want to, in your discussions with PCL, like, did that ever come up as like how they're coordinating, like, hey, how this works with the master schedule or how this works with the contract? And did that kind of stuff ever come up in your conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was part of the learning, as you said. That's part of the whole, call it the umbrella of collaboration. There's all kinds of aspects, and I believe that idea of drilling down into the details was absolutely very critical of getting the real value of what people needed. And the idea of control, I mean, one of the principles of lean is adding value. So how do you get the value from somebody if you're telling them what to do instead of asking them what they think? And, those are some of the things that you try and talk about, and you get agreement. And, sometimes We've had a speaker on our webinar series that talked about sports teams, that you buy into a system. Everybody adopts a system, or you know what, you're not going to win. You're not going to rise to a certain level. And I think that whole respect for people aspect of the Last Planner system I think that's what sets it apart from other planning methods. And so we keep that in mind at all times as well.
Yeah. Nancy, you have any thought about that, about why more people don't, to your point, collaborate better on a lot of these products and these projects?
It's one of my, I'd say, pet peeves that we never are taught how to meet better, to collaborate better. It's as if we all were born able to collaborate. First of all, when we were young, we had to be taught how to play nicely and we got socialized. But when we go to university and then out into work, nobody says, here's how you collaborate. And so I think one of the fundamentals of Last Planner is that it tries to bring that to life in the construction trailer where people are saying, this is what I can do, and people are, sort of riffing off everyone's promises and schedules, and that really does get to collaboration. One of the benefits that we've had is that on a new project, a fairly early stage project right now, on a data center just outside Berlin, there's a very, I would say, high profile and very good consultant that is participating in that project. And, he talks about some of the things that Alan just talked about. It's not about telling, it's about teaching, it's about encouraging, it's about keeping the structure in place and just helping people work through that. And if you really look at what motivates a team wants to succeed, a team wants to win. And it's not as if you're competing in construction, but you're winning against the clock. You're winning against a budget. You're winning against owner satisfaction. Those are the winning points. And I think everybody can come out a winner when they commit to a system where that system has proven value and where they can say, look what we accomplished at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're spot on with that, Nancy. It confuses me sometimes when I read the statistics, and the McKinseys and the Deloittes of the world put out the statistics of capital projects that go over schedule, over budget, and it is horrific to look at the numbers. I mean, it might as well be zero, compared to the ones that actually get done on time and on budget, and they collaborate well. I mean, the Key Bridge project right now in Maryland is one of these. It's going to go over schedule. It's going to go over budget. We're already seeing it. They're going to replace the GC. What is it? My thing is, and I just want to get your take on it. What is it that we're thinking this? That we have all these examples. We have of how well it works, of how Last Planner works well. What is it that's getting in the way? Do we think it's the contract? I always call it the coercion economy, where you've got low bidder wins the job, and then all of a sudden, now they're under your thumb a little bit. And you're like, hey, that's what your bid was, and now all we're doing is arguing about price, or we're arguing about scope of work, and we forget that the whole goal, the whole reason we got into this thing was to build something, right? Not to talk about how we're going to, arbitrate our way out of responsibility.
Yeah, I think you've hit an important aspect. We had Glenn Ballard on a webinar. He's one of the fathers of the Last Planner system, and his top of mind topic was transactional contracts, which is what you're referring to. Got to get this done by a certain amount, low bid wins. Oh, yeah, of course it's over now. We bid to win the job, etc. And he talked about relational contracts where everybody has a stake, everybody has value, everybody gets compensated if you're, on time, on budget. You have a vested interest in working together to make it work, rather than at odds with each other and finger pointing and doing your best not to work together, I suppose. So I think there's a bit of that. And I don't know if there's a big shift in the industry. Maybe Nancy knows knows better about that side. But definitely Glenn talked about that as, maybe it's just a different way that we need to work.
I think one of the things that comes to mind, so many projects rely on heroics. The superintendent pulling it out of the fire at the very last minute and hitting the deadline or, whatever. And that is not a long-term prescription for a sustainable approach. And so in some ways it comes down to old dogs and new tricks. And so, what has made you successful is very often what you think will make you successful in the future. And so, how do people move away from this heroic mentality and move into a much more process driven mentality in construction? If you think about it, there's not a lot that is sort of prefabricated and brought to the construction site. And so it's all sort of hands-on piecemeal labor that's done on the site. And so thinking about what the future holds and maybe some of the constraints that are amplified today could help people appreciate that we're actually in a very different place than we have been over the last 20 to 40 years. And so, what are those wake up calls that energize people that allow them to proactively change and not see that as being sort of a disrespect for what they've been able to accomplish with heroics?
Yeah, I love that. It's the hero effect, right? Everybody's been working out of that mode. And like to your point, over the past 40 to 50 years, they've had a different resource pool, right? Well, whether the labor pool was there, it was natural for them to be able to get back to the hall and get who they needed if it's a union kind of job, or there was plenty of workforce available. And now we don't have those same things. We don't have necessarily. When I was a journeyman carpenter way back when, I was working on a job, and the superintendent came back to the trailer. It was just after work. It was 120 degrees on the deck at that time. So we had started at like 5 a.m. in the morning, and we were cutting off work at about 1:30, 2 o'clock, just because it was heat of the day, and you could barely get anything done. And the owner had come in and said, well, just go back to the hall, just work them till they drop, and then go to the hall and get some more. And, the superintendent just looked at him and says, who? They're all here. Everybody that can work is here. And that was years ago. I'm not saying how old I am, but I'm just saying that was years ago. And it's frustrating to think about that, because even years ago, we didn't have all the resources that maybe they had back in the 30s or the 20s. And yeah, we still have this mentality that we're just going to go back to the hall, get some more folks, and we're going to throw some more money at it, and it's just going to solve everything. And I just think I find that just so fascinating. And like to your point, like, well, we're going to be heroes on this job. That is definitely not a future plan. It's not sustainable at all.
And I think the other aspect, Robert, that we forget is the notion of data. Like, there may have been people planning with paper, etc., but you didn't have analytics where you could start to look at, how people were working. And, we have a company in the UK that's pushing us down the path of being able to filter data, over time in different regions. And they're starting to actually go to their subcontractors and say, hey, listen, I put you on a graph with some of your other competitors, and here's where you sit. And they're having these conversations of saying, you know what, if you did a bit more of this, you would get better and be a trusted partner. And the company is going, oh, wow, so I'm more efficient. Now I can do more work because I can get on to the next job. So it becomes a mutual win-win conversation. You couldn't do that with paper and counting notes or counting your Excel spreadsheet or,
Yeah.
MS Pro or whatever it was. There's data that we export out of our plans that we realize we're a data company, and we have companies that are actually taking advantage of it in the lean concept of getting better and reducing risk, increasing safety. and you get happier workers and owners, etc. So I think that's a bit of a turning point, that aspect. And of course, there will be even more changes with the advent of some of the new algorithms we're seeing.
I agree with you. I think that there's an operational science that has been kind of lost in the shuffle over the years. Again, we've gone all this focus to we'll figure it out when we're all done, and as we arbitrate who gets what, and how we're going to divvy up the last bit of whatever loss we've got and how we're going to pay the lawyers. But I think it gets to that point of we maybe at pen and paper days, we weren't able to get as granular, but in today's market, now we can actually utilize the data that we have and get more granular to get more precise on where your efficiencies are. I love that story, by the way. Here's where you're more efficient. And maybe if you focused on this, and Nancy, you may be able to speak to that too. If I bet you these things help people focus a little bit better on, hey, what's really important, what's not.
You bet. There's one thing from speaking to that same contractor that really struck me, and he said that now their company is going after a lot of contracts that have serious penalty clauses in them because they find that there's less competition on them, and they have a much chance that they're going to be able to hit the timeline and therefore avoid the penalty clauses. So they're finding what for many construction companies is sort of a fraught, I'd say, bidding environment, the penalty clauses. They're looking at that saying, we know we can do this. We know that we're going to get early warning on where we're falling behind. We can foresee that. We can take action. And therefore, we are going to bid on these projects.
Yeah, and that also helps with the scale of what the rate is. We're not talking about low bidder market there. We're talking about can they capably get that job? It's capacity. It's a capacity evaluation rather than a dollar evaluation of it. And it's a more realistic view, I think, in the end for the owner to understand the reason that this person is at the place where they're at, because they understand their capacity. They understand what they can get done and they're not just guessing. It's not a guess number. It's not we're really just going to try to work our way in here just to get to a certain point so then we can change order you to death after it's all said and done.
Yeah. And their brand gets trusted. Hey, these people bid on hard jobs and they get it done. And again, that's the satisfying part of the story is when you hear things like that. Like that on the Notre Dame project, I know there was a big push to get it done before the Olympics, and we were used on a very small part of it, not on the whole plan, but on one part. And you just have a good feeling that you were part of that.
And I love that idea because it sounds like you get a lot of great feedback from your product that basically says, this helps us improve. This makes us a better company. This makes us more competitive. And I think, again, there's a lot of folks out there looking for that. Like, how do we get more competitive? And what I think, Nancy, we were talking about is getting specific on where our efficiencies are, right? Getting specific about our communication, getting specific about what's going to serve us best in the moment.
Absolutely.
Or for the asset.
Yeah, you talk to a lot of these companies and they are very proud of their long history, but you also talk to them about the fear that they have that they won't be able to scale and stay in business for another 30, 40 years. And so many companies that we're encountering are talking about how do we ensure our future? And we hear these very specific comments about future success and assuring their future, and it lies in migrating to a much more process driven way of thinking, using data to analyze things, and they do recognize that they're going to need to change from heroics into a much more planful and collaborative environment.
So you guys have released some new stuff here in the last few weeks. Alan, I just, you want to touch on that real quick? You've got, pictures and now things within your product, and kind of tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, one of the things that we recognize is that the plan has artifacts associated with it. If you go to a job site trailer, there might be, drawings posted of the current phase of the work, and people with iPads with drawings, and there's been a bit of a push. The superintendents will do a walkabout, daily walk through to see progress just with their own eyes. And so what we've said is that some of these artifacts in, I'll call it the information environment that is the building project, like what's actually going on out on the job site, we've recognized that that's important. So with the mobile phone, we have the ability now to say, with this activity, I can take these photos, and either it's proof that it's done, or there's a reason it didn't get done, or that this is the status. It just becomes more information. I call that, I see what you mean. You can talk about it and wave your hands, but when you can point to something and say, that's what we're talking about, that stairwell's in the wrong spot, and there's no way that I can get my work done. Whatever it is, it's visualization and information that just helps the team be on the same page. And so that's very valuable. And we'll follow that up with the ability to map drawings to activities or whatever the case may be. So we're pretty excited about it. And we've had some pretty good reactions. And, again, it came from observation and from people saying, hey, what if? And so that, I think, was a major accomplishment. And we also released a few other things that allow companies to control things across their organizations. For example, there's something called reasons for variance, which is when you don't get something done, you say why you didn't get it done. And so now they can make those standard across subscriptions or plans or regions, and they can start to track, again, the analysis. How come our supply continues to be a problem of not getting things done? Let's plan 2 weeks ahead so we get the supply coming in. You'll see that bar graph drop. Or else they'll say, why is the Eastern region always on time, with, fewer reasons or fewer not done tags, and what's going on in the Western region? They're hitting it out of the park. So organizational learning is something that when we release things, we're thinking about that. Again, how do you help companies get better? So I think those two aspects were the major parts of our
And I think you guys are,
release.
it sounds like you guys are setting yourself up, and AI is always a huge buzzword. Everybody, it's not a thing. It's a process, right? AI is really, it's a technology. It's very specific to whatever business that you're going to be in, however you use it. But it sounds to me like you guys are putting yourself in a good position to have some AI enabled features. As we know, pictures are worth 1,000 words. That's one thing. You're gathering the data. The accuracy of the data is very important as well when it's time-stamped and dated, those types of things. So that's important. Nancy, I want to kind of talk to you about that. Is that where you see a lot of these features that are new moving into the product?
Of some very early work with that. Dave Martin, who's our CTO, but also my husband, he's kind of leading the charge in that area. He's got an intense interest in what AI can do for people. And it really relates to this whole concept of what can you get out of the data. He kind of talks about the project that he has underway as chat with your data. And I think what that is all intended to do is giving value to people from the data that is right there and making it much more accessible. So, it is exciting times. We're engaged with quite a number of customers in this area and trying to help give them a major say in the AI tool set that we deliver.
Alan, what's your take on it?
Well, obviously, Nancy and I are aligned on the importance, and she mentioned customer involvement. These are formalized proof of concepts where they're actually using, we've created a safe, secure environment for a couple of their plans, for example, and they can start to query just to sort of give you an idea, we're trying to find value not only for the people in the office that are doing the sort of longer term analytics, but what can we do for the superintendent who comes in Monday morning and wants to know what issues are in front of them, and more importantly, insights that will help and resolve uh, you know changes or issues or constraints. And so Nancy mentioned, getting early warnings about things rather than being reactive. You can now be proactive, for example. So high level goals for sort of the agentic AI approach. And I think, most companies are probably looking at that. And ours, again, is very customer centric and getting feedback, good, bad, or otherwise.
Yeah,
Just helps
well,
us with our learning models as well.
yeah, and I think we're all going to be very, very surprised about how, I'll say, regional that AI technology is. Kind of to your point, why is the Eastern region so much better at getting their supplies in rather than this place over here getting theirs? And everybody, it's not a one-size-fits-all game. It's going to be very, very specific because we're very specific in our location, our locality. We're very specific in who our suppliers are. We're specific in what our site conditions are. We're specific. I mean, everything about these jobs, as we always say, it's going to be a factor. Will that be something that you guys are considering as you start talking to your different companies about your AI capabilities? Is like, hey, it's going to really kind of form around you and how you use it.
Yeah, I think that'll be key, really. I think it's crawl, walk, run. Let's try and do some small things first and see then if we can learn from that and evolve. I consider it, it's going to be organic in my mind. I think if you don't look at it that way, you could go down a path that you could be sorry. I think you really need to be eyes wide open while we're doing this. It is so new and fascinating and interesting, and it's very expansive at the moment. It's very difficult to say here's where we should converge, and I think we need to have that, or we have that mindset currently that Dave's leading in his research group.
So
Several
Nancy,
people working on it.
yeah. So Nancy, we got to keep an open mind and communicate, and we have to listen, don't we?
Never stops. We talk as if developing a product is a destination. It actually isn't. It is a journey. And,
Journey.
all that we can hope is that the destinations along the way make a lot of sense. But we don't actually know where we're going at this point, and we just have to be open to all of the different ideas and go with them. We may end up going down a wrong route. Our customers may guide us there, but we can always come back and come at it a different way. So we're not afraid of taking a wrong step. I would be more afraid of not taking a step.
I totally agree. Speaking of journeys, we've come on a long one here. 45 or so minutes goes pretty quick when you're having these kind of conversations. I really do appreciate you, Alan. Nancy, thanks for being on the Contact Exec podcast today. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of folks that really want to listen to what we've done here. I also want you guys out there in Contact Exec world to check out Nialli. Nancy, what is the web address? How can they check it out?
www.nialli.com. It's very simple.
All right. Well, I will be leaving that in the links in the comments so that everybody's got a link to Nialli. Alan, thank you so much. Nancy, again, thank you. Until next time, folks, I hope you'll join us again on the Contact Exec podcast, but we will see you all very, very soon.